multi-class single label classification problem, our goal is to predict a film's genre given its plot. Note that our project details were documented in 3 different notebooks. I will be presenting the details within the first notebook, followed by /Tran, and lastly, Tran. We will require data on film plots and its genre. And as part of the process, we will actually require film titles. The libraries used were Request as well as Beautiful Soup for scraping title and genre. As shown in the image on the left, we have scraped for approximately 11,000 films across 10 different genres, with comedy being the largest class and fantasy being the smallest. Also, we have identified the number of duplicated films by genre as shown on the right. Prior to scraping for film plots, first, we have removed duplicated films according to its title. Second, for genres with more than 500 films, rebalancing was actually done to using according to random state while clipping to the maximum of 500 films. Otherwise, for classes less than 500 films, we will take it as it is. Plots were scraped using Wikipedia and Wikipedia API libraries through try and accept approach. After scraping for film plots, we have removed the following films: films with null or blank plots, page with no section on plot, films with error plots, and films with plots that have word count less than 10. 10 is an arbitrary number. It is to prevent situations in CNN 1D where plot length is less than kernel size. Lastly, we remove punctuations from plots and obtain the final usable dataset, which I will show 2 slides later. Before we look at the final usable dataset, we have conducted box plot analysis on the word count as well as stop words count for each genre. We observe that the distribution of word count across different genres, shown on the left, is highly similar to the distribution of stop words count, shown on the right. On average, we observe that stop words takes up approximately 40% of the plot, regardless of the genre. That being said, removal of stop words may not impact any individual class more significantly compared to others. After all the pre-processing, we have finally obtained our final usable dataset. Further processing may be done during model development phase as required. If you have noticed, we actually have 2 datasets, as the first dataset contains lesser films. Thus, following earlier steps, we have generated a larger dataset to monitor changes in model performance. Next, I'll hand over to Sashkan to elaborate further on the baseline models.
In this section, we basically look at some traditional ML models. By looking at the paper that is cited in this slide, we found an implementation that allowed us to basically evaluate the difficulty of our problem. We tried TF-IDF, part of speech, and pre-trained embeddings, and ran them through a decision tree classifier. Using k-fold cross-validation, we found about 34.8% as the best performing model on TF-IDF. This confirmed that the problem we had was a difficult one. We then moved on to our deep learning problem using a multi-layer perceptron. We tried different types of representations: glove, word-to-vec, TF-IDF weighted word-to-vec, and fast text, and then analyzed the results by looking at the confusion matrix, accuracy by each class, and train and validation loss. We achieved about 42% on that full-size 10-class problem with reasonably unstable training. However, on a 4-class problem, we achieved a stable 63.8%. The main highlight was a custom framework we developed to run our experiments seamlessly. We implemented some of the functionality from scratch and defined a JSON in specifying the experiment. The framework then runs the experiment and generates the outputs. The outputs are handily placed in a location that we can then use for analysis. On the 4-class problem, we achieved the best accuracy using 300-dimension glove vectors. On the 10-class problem, we did so using the 100-dimension. One key observation that we noticed was that the mean vector, that is the sum of the vectors of all the words in the plot, is not a good enough representation of the plot itself, and that differences in topics, which is what word embeddings are good at capturing, do not always correlate with differences in the genre. Finally, in some cases, we found that the data set was also skewed. In this example, we see the confusion matrix on the right through the different epochs. We can see that at the start, it's spread all over the place, and it starts accumulating on the leading diagonal, which is the correct result. In the middle, we see that historical and fantasy are doing really poorly throughout, but other classes start off doing really poorly and then start getting better throughout. Finally, the train loss basically shows us that the model is training correctly. The next section, we're going to look at CNN and RNN-based approaches to mitigate some of these failures.
2, 3.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, my name is John. Now I present the deep learning model for film chance classifications. So I use CNN1D, RNN, LSTM, attention, and transformers for deep learning part. For the data preparation, I use the final data set 1-zip in the file that Wayhow that provided, which contain 10 joins and around like 2,400 plots. Then I tokenize all of the plots, and the step 3 and 4 are just optional to check the performance or to increase the performance. The architecture for CNN1D include the embeddings, then fit into the CNN1D and go into the fully connected layers. The default parameters is listed at this slide. This is the table for showing the performance of each of the architectures. So the first row is the default for CNN, we achieve around 43% of the validation accuracies. The second row, we use the pre-trained embeddings, and it significantly increased the performance to 57 of the accuracies. And the below is just some of the adjusting the higher learning rate, the adapt optimization, then I add the dropouts, and using the clipping or lemmaization or stemmings, and it just changed the accuracies from like 58 to around like 59 something. Then I use the RNN and LSTMs, and we can see that the RNN and LSTM generally not perform well compared to CNN1D. So one reason is that maybe the network is even the same size of the CNN, but it's not really like too big to capture the context of the plot's meaning. And maybe that the film plot is meaningful if we capture the neighborhood of the text rather than capture all of the words in the plots, as in the case of RNN and LSTM. Furthermore, I use the RNN attentions, and the performance is increasing. So you see the attention for RNN and LSTM is better than if we don't use any attentions. The final one, I use the transformers. So the transformer have the relative good performance compared to CNN1D, RNN, and LSTM. At the final step, I use the 4 Johns data set only after we see that which of the John is related together, and then we see that the increased performance for all of the models. We have the summaries. We have the data collections, film Johns from different countries, and U10 Johns for classifications. The MLP model is really good if we use the pre-trained embeddings, and the deep learnings, we also good for the CNN models and cell attention transformer if the model can capture the neighbor relationship. And the RNN and LSTM is not good because it just captured the temporal relationship. Thank you for hearing our presentations.